He cheated with my sister. 10 years later, I married his dad. Sounds like the title of some trashy daytime talk show, right? Well, welcome to my life, the ultimate episode of Who's Screwing Who. Spoiler alert, eventually it was me doing the screwing, metaphorically and, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I still remember the exact moment my world imploded. Picture it, me walking into my apartment after pulling a double shift at the hospital. I'm a nurse, or I was back then, and I'd spent 16 hours dealing with bodily fluids and entitled patients demanding pain meds. All I wanted was a hot shower, some Thai takeout, and to curl up next to Ryan, my boyfriend of 3 years. What I got instead was silence. That weird, heavy silence that feels like a physical thing pressing against your chest. Have you ever had that feeling where you just know something's wrong? Like your body figures it out before your brain does? My stomach dropped through the floor the second I walked in. The lights were dimmed. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. One with lipstick that wasn't mine. A shade of pink I'd seen countless times at family dinners. No fucking way. I remember standing there, keys still dangling from my finger, as my brain desperately tried to create alternate explanations. Maybe it was a friend of hers stopping by? Maybe they were planning a surprise for me? Yeah, they were planning a surprise, all right. I heard it before I saw it. Those unmistakable sounds coming from our bedroom, in the apartment I paid 60% of the rent for because Ryan was finding himself through his photography career. Turns out what he was finding was what was under my sister's clothes. Here's a fun fact about adrenaline. It makes time slow down. I swear to God I could hear my own heartbeat as I walked down that hallway. Thump, step, thump, step, like a countdown to the demolition of my life as I knew it. I didn't burst through the door screaming like they do in movies. I just opened it, quietly, like I was the one who should be apologetic about interrupting. And there they were, Ryan and my sister Melissa, in my bed, on the sheets I'd bought from Pottery Barn during their annual sale, which I'd been so proud of finding. Stupid, right? In the middle of discovering the 2 people I trusted most betraying me, I was fixated on the fucking thread count of the sheets they were doing it on. They didn't notice me at first. I just stood there, hand still on the doorknob, watching the bizarre theater of my life falling apart. It was Melissa who saw me first. Her eyes went wide, this almost comical expression of, oh shit, spreading across her face. The same expression she'd had when we were kids, and I caught her trying on my prom dress without permission. Except this wasn't my fucking prom dress. The details are seared into my brain. Ryan's back. The butterfly tattoo on my sister's hip that I'd gone with her to get for her 21st birthday. The way the afternoon light came through the blinds and made stripes across their bodies. Time fragmented into these little frozen snapshots, like my mind was taking pictures it knew I'd need later. Evidence of the crime. What followed was, well, predictable, I guess. The scrambling, the sheet grabbing. Ryan saying my name in that way people do when they're caught. Half surprise, half this pathetic attempt to act like somehow this wasn't exactly what it looked like. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just felt cold all over like I'd been dunked in ice water. That's shock for you. The body's way of saying, this is too much right now. We're going to turn off your emotions before they kill you. My sister started crying. Isn't that rich? She started crying. Like somehow she was the victim in all this. Ryan tried to touch my arm, and I remember flinching away like his fingers were made of fire. I walked out, grabbed my keys where I'd dropped them in the hallway and just left. I got in my car and drove to a Starbucks parking lot where I sat for 3 hours, staring at nothing. My phone kept lighting up. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, most from Ryan, some from Melissa. Delete. 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 You know that feeling when your entire body feels hollow? Like someone scooped out all your insides and left just the shell? That's where I lived for the next few weeks. Going through the motions at work, sleeping on my friend Kate's couch, ignoring the increasingly desperate attempts at contact from both of them. Ryan's messages went from, I'm so sorry, to, it was a mistake, to, it only happened a few times, as if that made it better, to, you're overreacting, to, fine, be that way, in the span of 2 weeks. My sisters were worse, full of excuses and you don't understand and we need to talk about this as a family. Family. That word used to mean something. My parents got involved, of course. They always had a soft spot for Melissa, the baby of the family, the pretty one, the one who just feels things more deeply, according to my mother. They wanted us to work it out and move past this for the sake of family harmony. Translation: sweep it under the rug so we don't have awkward Thanksgivings. I refused. Cut them all off. Changed my number. Moved to a different apartment across town. Started picking up extra shifts at the hospital to avoid having time to think. Grief and betrayal evolved into numbness, and then eventually into something else. Something harder, colder. It was during one of those extra night shifts, about 6 months after the discovery, yes, it had capital letters in my mind, that I met him. An older man, brought in after a minor car accident. Nothing serious. Mild concussion, a few scrapes. He was in his late 50s maybe, distinguished looking, with salt and pepper hair, and this commanding presence that made the doctors actually behave themselves for once. He was polite, unlike most of our patients, called me nurse instead of honey or sweetheart, asked actual questions about his care instead of just complaining, and he had kind eyes, the kind that crinkle at the corners when they smile. I've always been a sucker for kind eyes. I checked his chart. Robert Daniels, 58. No listed emergency contact. It wasn't until I was helping him fill out his discharge papers that I saw it. The address. I recognized the street, one of those wealthy neighborhoods where all the houses look like they should be in magazines. And then I saw his full name, Robert Daniels, Sr., which meant there was a junior. And that's when it clicked. The resemblance around the eyes. The same strong jawline, just a bit more weathered with age. This wasn't just any Robert Daniels. This was Ryan's father, Ryan Daniels Jr., the cheating bastard who had screwed my sister in my bed. A strange feeling washed over me then. Not quite a plan, nothing so formed. More like the first hint of possibility. A tiny spark landing on very dry kindling. He didn't recognize my name, of course. Ryan and I had never gotten to the meet the parents stage. Mr. Daniels, Robert, just smiled that crinkly-eyed smile as I handed him his paperwork, completely unaware that I knew exactly who he was. Completely unaware that his son had shattered my heart 6 months earlier. Completely unaware that in that moment, something shifted in me. I smiled back, and for the first time in 6 months, it felt real. I'd like to say I immediately hatched some diabolical revenge plan that night. That I went home and made a creepy vision board with pictures of Robert and Ryan with the eyes scratched out. But that's not how real life works. What actually happened was more organic, more twisted in its own way. I looked Robert up online the next morning. Just curiosity, I told myself. Turned out he was kind of a big deal. Founded his own investment firm, sat on the boards of several charities, had that whole silver fox thing going that screams, "I have a vacation home in the Hamptons." His wife, Ryan's mom, had passed away about 5 years earlier. Cancer. That explained the no emergency contact. I felt a twinge of sympathy for him. Losing someone you love leaves a hole nothing can fill. I knew about holes like that now. For weeks after that, I did nothing. Just filed the information away and went about rebuilding my life. I found a better apartment. Started going to therapy. Deleted all my social media so I wouldn't be tempted to stalk Ryan or my sister online. Cut my hair short and dyed it darker, the classic post-breakup transformation. Applied for a position in the hospital's administrative offices to get away from the night shifts that were slowly killing me. Life was fine, not great, not terrible, just fine, until the hospital fundraiser gala. As the newest member of the administrative team, I got roped into helping organize it. Fancy hotel ballroom, silent auction, rich people in designer clothes writing tax-deductible checks while nibbling on overpriced canapes. I was checking place cards at the registration table when I heard his voice. "Well, hello again, nurse." Robert was standing there in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my car, looking surprised and pleased to see me. He didn't remember my name. Why would he? But he remembered I was his nurse. I reminded him who I was, explained my new position, and watched recognition light up his face. "Emma." "Of course." "You were very kind to me during my stay. Much more patient than I deserved." He was on the hospital's donor committee, it turned out, one of the big fish we were all supposed to suck up to. My boss practically shoved me toward him when she realized we had a connection, suggesting I give him a personal tour of our display about the new pediatric wing his donation was helping fund. So there I was, making small talk with Ryan's father, showing him architectural renderings of buildings his money would help build, while inside my head all I could see were flashbacks of his son's naked back as he betrayed me with my own sister. Life has a sick sense of humor sometimes. The weird thing was, I enjoyed talking to him. Robert was nothing like Ryan. Where Ryan was all charm without substance, Robert was solid, thoughtful, He asked questions and actually listened to the answers, made dry jokes that caught me off guard, looked me in the eye when I spoke instead of glancing around the room to see if someone more interesting was nearby. He asked for my card at the end of the night, said the hospital was lucky to have someone as sharp as me on their team. I told myself it was just professional networking when I gave it to him. Just being good at my job. 3 days later, flowers arrived at my office. Elegant, not flashy. The card just said, "Thank you for the conversation." It was the only part of that stuffy event worth remembering. RD. I should have thrown them away. Should have drawn a clear ethical line. Should have remembered that this was Ryan's father, for Christ's sake. Instead, I put them in water and felt something warm in my chest for the first time in almost a year. When he called to invite me to lunch, just to discuss some ideas for the pediatric wing funding, I said yes. I told myself it was innocent. Just business. Just networking with an important donor. But you know what? Part of me, a small dark part I wasn't ready to acknowledge yet, whispered something else. Whispered that this was the universe handing me something. An opportunity. A thread that, if pulled, might unravel something interesting. Lunch was at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind with no prices on the menu. Robert was already there when I arrived, standing when he saw me, pulling out my chair. Old school manners that made me feel seen, valued. When was the last time Ryan had pulled out a chair for me? Had he ever? "I hope this isn't inappropriate," Robert said after we'd ordered. "I'm on the board. You work for the hospital. There's probably some rule against this." "Probably," I agreed, sipping my water. "But I won't tell if you won't." He smiled at that, the same crinkly-eyed smile that had first caught my attention, but with something else there now. Interest. Warmth. "Deal," he said. We talked about everything except the hospital. Books we'd read recently. Places we wanted to travel. How we both hated kale but pretended to like it because it was supposed to be good for you. He told me about growing up in Boston, about building his business from nothing, about losing his wife. "Linda was my whole world for 30 years, he said, his eyes going distant. "When she got sick, I thought I'd die right along with her." "I'm so sorry," I said, and meant it. "It's been 5 years. The pain changes shape, but it doesn't really go away." He shook his head. "What about you? Anyone special in your life?" My heart did a little stutter step. Here it was. The moment I should tell him everything. Say his son's name. Watch recognition dawn. End whatever this weird lunch thing was before it became something complicated. "There was someone," I said carefully. "It ended badly." "His loss," Robert said simply. "You have no idea," I thought. Our lunch stretched into coffee, then dessert. 2 hours turned into 3. We walked out into the afternoon sunlight, and there was that awkward moment that comes at the end of something that wasn't quite a date but wasn't quite not a date either. "I'd like to see you again," he said directly. No games, no pretense. Not to talk about hospital business, just to talk. "Would that be something you'd consider?" I should have said no, should have walked away. Should have remembered that this man's DNA was half responsible for the person who'd broken my heart. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'd like that." As he walked me to my car, his hand gently touched the small of my back. Such a simple gesture. Protective. Gentlemanly. It sent electricity up my spine. Here's the thing about being betrayed. It makes you see the world differently. Makes you suspicious of kindness. Makes you look for the angle, the hidden motive, the trap waiting to be sprung. I kept waiting to feel that with Robert, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it didn't. We started seeing each other regularly. Dinners, museum exhibits. Once, a concert in the park where we sat on a blanket and he pointed out constellations I'd never learned to identify. Always in public, always proper. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He told me about his frustrations with his son, never naming him, just referring to "my boy" with a sigh of disappointment. How he'd given him every advantage, paid for the best schools, set him up with connections, only to watch him drift through life without direction or ambition. "He's 32 years old and still hasn't figured out what he wants to be when he grows up," Robert confided during one dinner. "His mother babied him. I probably did too. Now I'm watching him make the same mistakes over and over. If he only knew." 3 months into whatever this was, he kissed me goodnight at my door. A perfect gentleman's kiss, brief but with unmistakable intent. When he pulled back, those kind eyes searched mine for permission, for reciprocation. "I know I'm too old for you," he said softly. "I know this probably makes no sense, but I haven't felt this way in a very long time." I kissed him back, harder, deeper, let myself fall into it. When I finally pulled away, breathless, there was only one thought pounding through my head. What would Ryan think if he could see us now? And that's when I knew this wasn't just about connection or comfort or moving on. This was about revenge. Cold, calculated, brilliantly karmic revenge. I smiled up at Robert, this decent man who had no idea he was a pawn in a game he didn't even know was being played. "Would you like to come inside?" I asked. He did. "Sleeping with your ex's father is complicated. Morally gray at minimum. I'm aware of that. But lying in Robert's arms that first night, watching his chest rise and fall in the dim light filtering through my bedroom curtains, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. What had started as a spark of vengeful possibility was evolving into something messier, more real. The sex was incredible. Turns out experience really does count for something. But it was more than that. Robert listened when I talked, remembered the little things, treated me like I mattered. Still, I hadn't forgotten why we'd connected in the first place. Every time Robert mentioned my son with that mixture of love and disappointment, my stomach would knot. The ghost of Ryan hovered at the edges of our relationship, unseen but ever present. I hadn't told Robert about my history with Ryan. Not yet. I kept waiting for the right moment, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. The lie of omission grew between us like an invisible wall, one only I could see. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked one Sunday morning as we lingered over coffee in his kitchen. His house was exactly what you'd expect. Tasteful, expensive, masculine. Windows overlooking a manicured backyard. Art that probably cost more than my annual salary. "Nothing important," I lied, stirring cream into my coffee. He gave me that look, the one that said he knew I was bullshitting but wouldn't push. "You know you can tell me anything, right? I'm not as fragile as I look. If only that were true." Our relationship progressed with the inevitability of a slow-moving train. He gave me a key to his house after 2 months. I started leaving clothes in his dresser. We developed routines. Sunday brunches, Friday night movies, walks in the park where he'd hold my hand without self-consciousness, despite the 24-year age gap. And with each passing week, my revenge fantasy both crystallized and complicated itself. I started dropping hints about meeting his family. Casual comments about what his friends and relatives might think of me. Subtle nudges toward integration into his life beyond our private bubble. "My son is coming to town next weekend," Robert mentioned one night over dinner. "He wants to have lunch." My heart stuttered in my chest. "Oh? That's nice. I'd like you to meet him, actually." Robert reached across the table for my hand. "It's time, don't you think? We've been seeing each other for almost 5 months now." 5 months. Had it really been that long? My plan, if you could call it that, had been vague at best in the beginning. Make Ryan's father fall for me. Eventually engineer a meeting where Ryan would discover us together. Watch his face as he realized his dad was sleeping with his ex. Sweet karmic justice. But now I cared about Robert. Actually cared. The revenge narrative was getting muddied by real feelings, real connection. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" I asked carefully. "Meeting the kids is a big step." Robert smiled, lines crinkling around his eyes. "I'm crazy about you, Emma. I want the important people in my life to know each other." Guilt twisted in my stomach. What would happen when Ryan saw me? When Robert learned I'd been keeping this massive secret? When they both realized I'd been orchestrating this whole situation? I'd be the villain in their story. The manipulative younger woman who used a man's affection to get back at his son. But then I remembered the image of Ryan and my sister in my bed. The casual way they'd destroyed everything I thought was solid in my life. The family gatherings I could no longer attend because everyone had decided it was easier to forgive the betrayers than accommodate the betrayed. "I'd love to meet him," I said, squeezing Robert's hand. The lie tasted bitter. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake beside Robert, planning and plotting like Lady Macbeth without the murder. Should I accidentally run into Ryan before the lunch? Warn him? Surprise him? What would maximize the impact? What would hurt the most? And more importantly, what would happen to Robert in the fallout? He didn't deserve to be collateral damage. He wasn't part of what Ryan and Melissa had done to me. The next morning, I made a decision. I would tell Robert the truth before the lunch. Come clean about everything. If he decided to end things, so be it. If by some miracle he understood and wanted to continue our relationship, we'd face Ryan together. No more manipulation. No more lies. I rehearsed my confession a dozen different ways. Practiced it in the shower, in the car, in front of my bathroom mirror. The words always sounded hollow, self-serving. Because they were. 2 days before the planned lunch, I went to Robert's house armed with my prepared speech and a bottle of his favorite scotch. Liquid courage, for both of us. He opened the door with that smile that still made my heart skip, kissed me hello like I was precious, led me into his study where a fire crackled despite the mild evening. "You look serious," he said, taking the scotch from my hands. "Should I be worried?" I took a deep breath. "Robert, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning." His face grew still, that careful mask successful men learn to wear when bracing for bad news. "I'm listening." I opened my mouth to begin my confession, and his phone rang. Robert glanced at it, frowning. "It's Ryan. He never calls this late. Do you mind if I nodded, heart pounding. "Ryan? What's wrong?" Robert's expression shifted from concern to shock as he listened. "Where are you?" "No, stay there. I'm coming now." He hung up, already moving toward the door. "I'm sorry, Emma. Ryan's been in an accident. Nothing life-threatening, but he's at Memorial Hospital. I need to go." Memorial, my hospital, where I still worked 3 days a week in administration. "I'll come with you," I heard myself say. Robert looked relieved. "Would you?" He said, "It's just a broken arm, but still." And just like that, my carefully constructed plan collapsed. No controlled revelation. No preparation. Within 30 minutes, I would be face to face with Ryan, in the very hospital where I'd first met his father. The universe has a fucked up sense of timing. As Robert drove toward the hospital, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, one thought kept circling my mind. This was it. The moment everything would either fall spectacularly apart or transform into something I hadn't even imagined. Either way, there was no turning back now. The drive to Memorial was the longest 15 minutes of my life. Robert tried making a few calls, leaving messages for Ryan's friends, asking if any of them had been with him. I just stared out the window, watching streetlights blur past, rehearsing what I would say when the inevitable explosion happened. Because it would happen. There was no scenario where this ended quietly. "Thank you for coming with me," Robert said, reaching for my hand at a red light. "Having you there will make this easier." I almost laughed. Having me there would make things exponentially worse, but he couldn't know that. Not yet. My stomach twisted into tighter knots as we pulled into the hospital parking lot. I'd walked through those automatic doors hundreds of times as an employee. Tonight I was walking in as a ticking time bomb. "He's in the ER, Robert said, checking his phone. "Said they're casting his arm now." I followed him through the familiar corridors, nodding at coworkers who gave me curious looks. What was Emma from administration doing here at 10 p.m. with an older man who was clearly not her father? The ER waiting room was mercifully quiet, just a few people scattered across the molded plastic chairs, staring at their phones or the muted TV mounted in the corner. Robert approached the desk while I hung back, scanning the room for any sign of Ryan. "I'm Robert Daniels." "My son was brought in with a broken arm?" The nurse, Tanya, who I knew from my nursing days, nodded and pointed toward a row of curtained examination areas. "Bay 3. Doctor's just finishing up." Robert turned to me. "Coming." No turning back now. I followed him down the line of curtained partitions, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Bay 3. The curtain was partially drawn. I could see a pair of men's shoes dangling from the examination table. "Ryan?" Robert called softly, pulling the curtain aside. And there he was, my ex, the cheater, the man who had casually decimated my life without a second thought. Sitting on the exam table with his arm in a fresh white cast, looking exactly the same yet somehow smaller than I remembered. Time seemed to stop as our eyes met. I watched the sequence of expressions cross his face: confusion, recognition, shock, panic. "Dad," he croaked, eyes never leaving my face. How did you... His gaze flicked between Robert and me, putting the pieces together in real time. "You remember Emma?" Robert said, completely misreading the situation. "She works at the hospital, administrative team. We've been seeing each other for a while now." The blood drained from Ryan's face so quickly I thought he might pass out. "Emma," he managed. "Just my name. Nothing else." Robert frowned, sensing the tension but not understanding it. "Do you two know each other?" The moment stretched, taut as piano wire. I could let Ryan answer, let him fumble through some explanation. But suddenly I was tired of giving him any control over my narrative. "Yes," I said, stepping forward. "Ryan and I dated for 3 years, until I caught him sleeping with my sister in our bed. There. Done. The truth. laid bare under the harsh fluorescent hospital lights. Robert's head snapped toward me, then back to Ryan. What? That Emma? The nurse he lived with in the apartment on Oakwood? So he had told his father about me. Interesting. Ryan's face had turned from white to red. Dad, I can explain. You knew? I cut in, staring at Robert. You knew about me before we met? Robert looked shell-shocked. He mentioned an Emma, a nurse. He never said, I didn't make the connection when we met. It's not an uncommon name. The realization hit me like a physical blow. For months I'd thought I was the one with the secret, the one with the power. But what if Robert had known all along? What if this whole relationship had been his own twisted game? Did you know? I demanded, my voice rising. When you asked me out, when you pursued me, did you know who I was? No! Robert looked genuinely horrified. Emma, God, no. I would never. How could you think that? A doctor appeared at the curtain, clipboard in hand, then quickly backed away when he sensed the atmosphere. Smart man. So this is what then? Ryan finally found his voice. Some sick revenge plot? Dating my father to get back at me? The accuracy of his assessment hit too close to home. I wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. That's ridiculous, Robert said firmly. Emma and I met by chance. We connected. This has nothing to do with you. But Ryan was watching my face closely. He'd always been good at reading me. Doesn't it, Dad? Look at her. She's not denying it. Robert turned to me, his expression pleading. Emma, here it was. The moment of truth, literally. I could lie, create some story about coincidence and fate, or I could be honest about how this started, if not how it had evolved. When I realized who Robert was, yes, I thought about how it would feel for you to find out, I admitted, looking straight at Ryan. After what you did, can you blame me? Ryan made a disgusted sound. See? She's been using you to get back at me. Fucking typical. Watch your mouth, Robert snapped. And maybe consider that not everything is about you. Oh, come on. You think it's a coincidence she's sleeping with my father? What I think, Robert said with dangerous quietness, is that you broke this woman's heart in the most despicable way possible, and now you're upset that she's moved on with someone who treats her with respect. Ryan's mouth fell open. Whatever response he'd expected from his father, it wasn't that. I felt lightheaded watching this exchange. Robert was defending me? After what I'd just admitted? This is insane, Ryan muttered. You're letting her manipulate you. The only person who's manipulated anyone here is you, Robert said. Cheating with her sister? In their home? I raised you better than that. A strange calm was settling over me as I watched them argue. Whatever happened next, whether Robert walked away from me or not, at least the truth was out. No more secrets, no more lies. The weight of it had been crushing me more than I'd realized. I think you should both leave, Ryan said sullenly. I can get an Uber home. Robert shook his head. I drove here to help you, and I will. But this conversation isn't over. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. Emma, would you mind waiting in the car? I need a few minutes with my son. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. As I walked out, I heard Ryan's voice behind me. Dad, you can't seriously be choosing her over... The rest was cut off as I moved down the corridor, past curious nurses and drowsy patients, out into the night air that felt shockingly cool against my flushed skin. I sat in Robert's car for 20 minutes, alternating between numbness and panic. What had I done? My grand revenge scheme had blown up spectacularly, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of Ryan being humiliated, I'd exposed myself as a manipulator. Instead of Robert discovering Ryan's betrayal on my terms, he'd been blindsided in the worst possible way. When the driver's door finally opened, I couldn't even look at him. Emma, Robert said quietly. I braced myself for goodbye. Robert, Not here, he said, starting the car. Let's talk somewhere else. We drove in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between us. I stared out the window, trying to read his profile in the flash of passing streetlights. His jaw was tight, hands gripping the steering wheel like he might snap it in half. 5 months of whatever this was, all crashing down because of one hospital visit. One curtain pulled back, one truth finally spoken. I expected him to drop me at my apartment. Instead, he pulled into a 24-hour diner, one of those places with sticky laminate menus and bottomless coffee. At 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, it was nearly empty. I thought we could use neutral territory. he said as we slid into a booth far from the only other customers. A tired waitress poured coffee without asking. Robert thanked her with automatic politeness, even now. I wrapped my hands around the mug, grateful for something to hold on to. "So?" he said after she walked away. "So," I echoed. "You dated my son." "Yes, for 3 years. Yes, and when we met at the hospital." I took a deep breath. Moment of truth. "I didn't know who you were at first. Not until I saw your full name on the paperwork. Then I recognized your address, realized you were Ryan's father, and you said nothing, not a question, a statement of fact." "No," he nodded slowly, absorbing this. "When I called you after the fundraiser, was that part of some plan?" "No. Yes. I don't know." I stared into my coffee. "When I realized who you were, it felt like the universe was handing me something. An opportunity to get back at Ryan." "Yes." My voice was barely audible. "But it wasn't just that. You were kind, thoughtful. Everything he wasn't." Robert ran a hand through his silver hair. "So which was it, Emma? Revenge or genuine interest? Because it can't be both. Can't it?" I looked up at him. "People aren't simple, Robert. We can want contradictory things simultaneously. I wanted to hurt Ryan, yes, but I started to care about you, more than I expected to, more than made sense for my stupid revenge fantasy." He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those eyes that seemed to see everything. "Ryan told me his version of what happened between you two." My stomach clenched. Did he mention the part where I found him and my sister in my bed? Or did he skip that detail? "He admitted to the affair, said it was a mistake, said you overreacted by cutting off your entire family." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Overreacted? They wanted me to get over it so we could all pretend to be one big happy family at Thanksgiving. My mother actually suggested I was being selfish by not forgiving them faster." Something flickered across Robert's face. Anger, but not at me. "He also said you disappeared, changed your number, moved apartments." "I did. He tried to find you, to apologize. Too little, too late." I took a sip of coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. His version of an apology was telling me it only happened a few times, like that made it better. Robert shook his head. "He always did try to minimize his mistakes instead of owning them. Linda and we failed him somehow. Failed to teach him how to be a man who takes responsibility." "That's not on you," I said automatically. "Ryan makes his own choices. As do you." His eyes found mine again. "Were you ever going to tell me?" The question hit me hard. Had I planned to tell him? Or was I going to keep up the charade indefinitely? "Yes," I said finally. "Actually, that's why I came over tonight. I was going to tell you everything before the lunch with Ryan. I had it all rehearsed. Then he called about the accident and fate forced your hand." Robert's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. "Something like that." We fell silent again. The waitress refilled our cups. I watched the steam rise, wondering if this was the end, if the next words out of his mouth would be goodbye. "You know what the really fucked up thing is?" Robert said suddenly, the profanity shocking from his usually measured lips. "Part of me understands exactly what you did." I looked up, surprised. "What?" "When Linda died, I was in a dark place. If someone had hurt her the way Ryan hurt you, I might have done worse than date their parent." He shook his head. "That doesn't make it right." "But I understand the impulse. So what now?" I asked, the question hanging between us. "Where does this leave us?" Robert sighed deeply. "I honestly don't know, Emma. On one hand, our relationship started under false pretenses. That's a hell of a foundation to try to build on." My heart sank. This was it then. The end. "On the other hand," he continued, "the past 5 months haven't been false. At least, they haven't felt false to me. The woman I've gotten to know, her kindness, her strength, her terrible taste in sci-fi movies, that woman feels real. A sliver of hope cracked through my despair. She is real. That's the part I've been trying to figure out myself. What started as something ugly, it turned into something I didn't expect. And what was that exactly?" His voice was gentle now. "Something good," I whispered. "Something I didn't want to lose." Robert reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "I need time to process all this, to figure out if we can move forward from here." I nodded, blinking back tears. "I understand. But I'm not walking away tonight," he added. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it directly. No more secrets. The relief that flooded through me was so intense it was almost painful. Not forgiveness, not yet, but not goodbye either. No more secrets, I agreed. Robert paid the bill, and we walked to the car in silence. As he drove me home, I thought about the strange path that had led us here. How my worst tragedy had somehow connected me to this man who was nothing like his son. How revenge had morphed into something more complex, more real. At my door he hesitated. "I'll call you tomorrow. We'll talk more then." I nodded. "Robert, I'm sorry. Not for caring about you, but for how it started. For not being honest sooner." He touched my cheek gently. "Get some sleep, Emma." As I watched him walk away, I realized something important. Whatever happened next, whether Robert decided to give us another chance or not, my revenge against Ryan no longer mattered. Somewhere along the way, without me noticing, healing had become more important than hurting, moving forward more vital than looking back. I had set out to destroy Ryan by taking something he valued, his father's approval, his family connection. Instead, I had found something I valued more than revenge. It was the most unexpected plot twist of all. I didn't sleep that night. Just stared at my ceiling, replaying every moment of the hospital confrontation, every word spoken in that diner. By morning, I'd convinced myself Robert would never call. Why would he? I'd manipulated him, used him as a pawn in my revenge fantasy. The fact that my feelings had evolved into something genuine didn't erase how things had started. The call came at 2:17 p.m. I stared at his name on my phone screen, heart hammering before answering. "Emma," he said, his voice giving nothing away. "Can we meet? My house around 6? Not a restaurant. Not neutral territory. His home. Was that good or bad?" "I'll be there," I said, then spent the next 3.5 hours alternating between obsessive outfit changes and rehearsing what I would say. Robert opened his door looking tired but composed. No kiss hello. No warm smile. Just a nod as he led me to his study, the same room where I'd planned to confess everything before fate intervened. "I talked to Ryan again this morning," he said, pouring himself a scotch without offering me one. Not a good sign. Got his full version of events, or at least, his version of his version. I perched on the edge of the leather sofa, hands clasped in my lap, and I've spent the day thinking about everything. About you, about us, about how we started. He took a long sip of his drink. About whether something that began as revenge can become something authentic. My throat tightened. "What conclusion did you reach?" Robert set his glass down and finally looked at me directly. "I think you used me, Emma. I think you saw an opportunity to hurt my son and you took it." Each word fell like a hammer blow. I couldn't even argue. It was the truth. "But," he continued, "I also think something changed along the way. For both of us." A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. "It did." "I'm angry," he said plainly. "I feel manipulated, deceived. But when I try to imagine walking away from you completely," he shook his head, "I can't do it. And that frustrates me even more." I stayed silent, afraid that anything I said might tip the scales the wrong way. "So here's what I propose," Robert said, sitting beside me. "We start over. Clean slate. No hiding, no revenge plots, no lies of omission. Just two people seeing where this goes with full transparency." Relief crashed over me so intensely I felt dizzy. "Yes," I whispered. "I'd like that, but," he held up a finger, "with one condition. You need to deal with your past properly, not just with Ryan, but with your sister, your family, the anger you're carrying. It's toxic, Emma, for both of us." I stiffened. "You want me to forgive them? I want you to confront them, to say what needs saying, face to face, not for their benefit, for yours." He took my hand. "Revenge doesn't heal wounds. It just creates new ones." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who'd been betrayed. "Ryan's still in town for another week," Robert continued. "He's staying at the Bay Hotel downtown. And according to him, your sister Melissa is flying in tomorrow to help him while his arm heals." My blood ran cold. "Melissa is coming here? They're still—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. "Apparently they've been seeing each other on and off since—" "Since what happened with you?" He says it's serious now. Of course they were. The betrayal wasn't just a one-time thing. They'd turned it into a relationship, building their happiness on the ruins of my trust. "I can't face them together," I said, my voice brittle. "I won't. You don't have to do it together. But if we're going to move forward, Emma, you need to close this chapter properly. For yourself." Robert's eyes were gentle but firm. "I know what I'm asking isn't easy." That was the understatement of the century. "I'll think about it," I said finally. He nodded, apparently accepting this non-commitment for now. There's something else. Ryan knows about us, obviously, and he's struggling with it. I bet he is. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. He's my son, Emma. Despite his flaws, despite what he did to you, he's still my son. I need to find a way forward that honors both relationships. Reality was setting in. If Robert and I stayed together, Ryan would always be part of our lives in some way. My perfect revenge, stealing his father's affection, had backfired. I'd have to deal with Ryan, possibly for years to come. I hadn't thought that far ahead. What are you saying exactly? I asked. I'm saying that eventually, if this relationship continues, we'll need to find some kind of peaceful coexistence. Not right away, but eventually. The idea made my stomach turn. Sunday dinners with the man who had cheated on me and the sister who had betrayed me? Holiday gatherings with forced smiles and tense politeness? But looking at Robert's face, the face I'd grown to care for, to trust, I knew I had a choice to make. The revenge path or the healing path. I couldn't have both. I'll talk to Melissa, I said finally. Not Ryan. Not yet. But I'll see my sister. It was more than I'd been willing to do in over a year. Robert's relief was palpable. He squeezed my hand, the first warm gesture since I'd arrived. Thank you. That night we didn't make love. Didn't even kiss beyond a brief goodnight at the door. The boundary he'd established was clear. We were starting over, back at square one, rebuilding from the ground up. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to contact Melissa. 3 days of drafting and deleting texts, of picking up my phone and putting it down again. In the end, I sent something simple. I hear you're in town. We should talk. Coffee at Lunar Cafe tomorrow, 10 a.m. Her response came within minutes. I'll be there. I arrived early, choosing a table in the back corner where we wouldn't be overheard. Ordered a double espresso to combat the exhaustion from another sleepless night. Watched the door with my heart in my throat. And then she was there. My sister. My only sibling. The person I'd shared a bedroom with for 16 years before our parents could afford a bigger house. The maid of honor at my wedding. If I'd ever gotten that far with Ryan. She looked exactly the same but also completely different. Same dark hair, same green eyes we'd both inherited from our mother. But there was a caution in her expression I'd never seen before, a wariness as she approached my table. Emma, she said softly. Melissa. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit, she did, ordering a chai latte when the waitress came by, the same drink she'd always preferred. Some things didn't change. Ryan told me about you and Robert, she said after the waitress left. It's unexpected. I let out a harsh laugh. That's one word for it. Are you happy? With him? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected accusations, defensiveness, not concern about my happiness. I think I could be, I answered honestly. We're figuring things out. Melissa nodded, fidgeting with a sugar packet. You look good. Your hair's different. Stop, I said sharply. Don't do the small talk thing. Not after everything. She flinched, but didn't argue. What do you want to say then? I'm here. I'm listening. What did I want to say? I'd rehearsed this confrontation countless times in my mind over the past year. Had imagined screaming at her, making her cry, watching her crumble under the weight of her betrayal. But sitting across from her now, all those practiced speeches felt hollow. Why, I asked simply. The question that had haunted me for 14 months. Why him? Why my boyfriend? Why in my bed? Melissa's eyes filled with tears. There's no good answer, Em. Nothing I can say will make it okay. Try anyway. She took a shuddering breath. It wasn't about you. That sounds terrible, but it's true. It wasn't about hurting you or taking something from you. It was just, Ryan and I had this connection, this chemistry. We tried to ignore it. For your sake. We really did. Oh, how noble of you, I spat. I know how it sounds. But by the time you found us, we were in love, Emma. The word hit me like a physical blow. Love. They'd destroyed my life for love. And now? You're still together? Melissa nodded, her hand moving to fidget with something on her left finger. A ring. An engagement ring. You're engaged, I stated flatly. To my ex, the man you cheated with. We were going to tell you, before the wedding. We wanted to find the right time. I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. The right time? When would that be exactly? Christmas dinner? Mom's birthday? When exactly is the right time to tell your sister you're marrying the man you stole from her? Emma, please. No. I cut her off. You don't get to ask anything of me? Not after this. We sat in tense silence, the cafe buzzing around us, oblivious to our private drama. I stared at the ring on her finger. Nothing flashy, a simple solitaire. Exactly the kind of ring I'd once hoped to get from Ryan. "Do you remember when we were kids?" Melissa said suddenly. "And I broke your favorite Barbie? The one with the special dress Grandma made?" I frowned at the non sequitur. "What does that have to do with anything? You were so mad. Wouldn't speak to me for days. Then Mom sat us down and made us talk it through. You told me exactly how I'd hurt you, and I promised to never touch your things without asking again." She looked up at me, eyes wet. "We were always able to work things out, Em. No matter what happened. This isn't a broken doll, Melissa. This is my life, my trust, my family." "I know," she whispered. "But you're still my sister." "Nothing changes that. Not even this." A lump formed in my throat. As furious as I was, as betrayed as I felt, some small part of me recognized the truth in her words. We were sisters. Blood. History. A lifetime of shared experiences. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said finally. "I don't know if I'll ever be. But I didn't come here for that. I came because—" Why had I come? Because Robert asked me to? Because I needed to move forward? Because carrying this anger was exhausting? "I came because I need to let this go," I finished. "Not for you. For me." Melissa reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done investing energy in hating you. In plotting revenge. In letting what you and Ryan did define my choices." I met her eyes directly. "I'm choosing something else now." "Robert," she said. "Maybe, but more importantly, myself." We talked for another hour. Not as sisters, not as friends, but as two adults trying to navigate complicated emotional terrain. She told me about her life this past year. I shared selective details about mine. We didn't hug when we parted. Didn't make plans to meet again. But something had shifted, a door left slightly ajar that had previously been slammed shut. When I told Robert about our meeting that evening, his pride was palpable. "That took courage," he said, pulling me into an embrace, our first real physical contact since the hospital night. "It wasn't as cathartic as I'd hoped," I admitted. No dramatic confrontation, no tearful apologies, just conversation. "Real life rarely gives us those movie moments," he said, brushing hair from my face. "But it's a start." "She's engaged to him," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Your son is marrying my sister." Robert sighed deeply. "Ryan told me he was planning to propose. I advised him to wait, to be sure. He never was good at taking my advice. How do you feel about it?" "Conflicted," he admitted. "Happy he's found someone he seems committed to. Troubled by how it began. Worried they're rushing into something without addressing the cracks in their foundation." I realized then that Robert and I had that in common. We were both trying to build something solid on complicated ground. "If they get married," I said slowly, "and if we stay together, that would make you my brother-in-law and my boyfriend." Robert blinked, then burst out laughing. "I hadn't thought of that. God, what a mess." His laughter was contagious. Soon we were both howling, the absurdity of our tangled relationships finally hitting home. It wasn't really funny. It was bizarre, complicated, potentially disastrous, but laughter felt better than tears. "Maybe this is the universe's idea of karma," I gasped when we finally caught our breath. "Everyone getting exactly what they thought they wanted, but in the most complicated way possible." Robert wiped his eyes, his expression growing serious. "Is this what you want, Emma? This complicated, messy situation? Because it's not too late to walk away. Find someone with less baggage. Someone your own age, without my son in the picture." I considered his question carefully. Was this what I wanted? The man before me, with all the complications he brought? The inevitability of awkward family gatherings, of explanations to friends, of Ryan and Melissa as permanent fixtures in our lives? A year ago, my revenge fantasy had been simple: make Ryan suffer, then walk away triumphant. But life had offered me something messier, more complex, and potentially more rewarding. "I want this," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Not the complications, not the drama, but you, us. Whatever that looks like going forward." Robert cupped my face in his hands. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." When he kissed me, it felt like the beginning of something new. Not a clean slate, we had too much history for that, but a fresh page in a continuing story. My revenge plan had failed spectacularly. Instead of destroying Ryan, I'd found a way to move beyond him. Instead of stealing Robert's affection to hurt his son, I'd gained something I valued far more than vengeance. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. 2 years can change everything, or nothing, or some complicated mix of both. That's how long it's been since that night in the hospital when my revenge plan imploded. 2 years since I sat across from my sister in a cafe and told her I was done hating her. 2 years of building something real with Robert, of navigating the strangest family dynamic imaginable, of learning that healing isn't linear and forgiveness isn't an event, but a process. A process that was about to be tested yet again. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Robert asked, straightening his tie in the mirror. "We can still cancel." I smoothed my dress. Navy blue, conservative enough for the occasion, but still showing off the curves that made Robert's eyes linger. "And miss the wedding of the year?" "Not a chance." Today, Ryan and Melissa were getting married. And yes, we were attending. Not as part of the wedding party, thank God. Melissa had actually asked me to be a bridesmaid, a delusional request that I'd shut down immediately. But we were going, as guests, as family, a concept I was still struggling to define. "You know it's going to be awkward as hell," Robert said, wrapping his arms around me from behind, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Oh, I'm counting on it," I smiled, leaning back against his chest. "Think about it. You're attending your son's wedding with his ex-girlfriend, who is the bride's sister, who is now your—" I paused, considering the right word. "Girlfriend seems inadequate at this point," Robert suggested. "Partner? Still doesn't capture the perfect wrongness of it all," he chuckled, pressing a kiss to my neck. "How about the love of my life? 2 years together, and he could still make my heart flip like that. Smooth talker." The invitation had arrived 6 months ago, addressed to both of us, an olive branch we'd debated accepting. Our relationship with Ryan and Melissa had evolved into something I could only describe as carefully civil, birthday cards exchanged, occasional group dinners that grew less strained each time, small steps toward whatever normal might eventually look like for our unconventional family. Family, there was that word again. "We don't have to stay long," Robert promised as we drove to the vineyard where they were holding the ceremony. "Just enough to show support, then we can make our excuses." I rested my hand on his thigh, a gesture that had become second nature. "Actually, I want to stay for the whole thing. Reception included." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Really? This isn't some last-minute revenge scheme, is it? You're not planning to object during the ceremony or spike the punch?" "Tempting, but no." I laughed. I need to see it through. All of it. For me." He covered my hand with his, understanding without needing more explanation. That was one of the things I loved most about Robert, his ability to hear what I wasn't saying. The ceremony was beautiful, I had to admit. Picture-perfect vineyard setting, golden late-afternoon light, rows of white chairs filled with people pretending our family situation wasn't the most gossiped-about topic of the event. My parents were there, of course, beaming proudly in the front row, still blissfully unaware of the tension simmering beneath the surface of our reconciliation. I watched my sister walk down the aisle, radiant in white lace. Watched Ryan's face as he saw her approach, his eyes filling with tears. It should have hurt, seeing them together like this. The man who had broken my heart, and the sister who had helped him do it, pledging eternal love to each other. But it didn't hurt. Not anymore. What I felt instead was more complex, a melancholy acknowledgement of what might have been, overshadowed by gratitude for what actually was. Because if Ryan hadn't cheated, if Melissa hadn't betrayed me, if my life hadn't shattered in exactly the way it did, I wouldn't be sitting here now, my hand clasped in Robert's, my heart full in a way it had never been with Ryan. During the reception, after the obligatory small talk and champagne toasts, I found myself alone at the bar, waiting for another glass of wine. A familiar voice behind me made me stiffen. "Thanks for coming," Ryan said. "It means a lot to Melissa. And to me." I turned slowly, measuring my reaction. The anger that had once burned so hot at the sight of him had cooled to something barely warm. "Congratulations," I said, meaning it. "You both look happy." "We are." He fidgeted with his cufflink, a nervous habit I'd forgotten until now. "Listen, Emma, I never properly apologized to you." "For everything." I raised an eyebrow. "You want to do this now? At your wedding reception? Better late than never?" He attempted a half-smile that faltered under my gaze. I was a coward. What I did to you was unforgivable, and instead of owning it, I made excuses, blamed you, minimized it. I studied him, trying to reconcile this man with the boy who had broken my heart. Why now, Ryan? He glanced across the room to where Robert was chatting with a group of guests. Dad, actually. We've been talking more this past year. Really talking. He told me I needed to make amends properly if I wanted to start my marriage right. Of course, Robert and his old-school principles of accountability. The man was still teaching his son how to be a better man, even as he shared a bed with his son's ex. Life was nothing if not complicated. I appreciate that, I said finally. And I accept your apology. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I'm done carrying the weight of what you did. Ryan nodded, relief evident in his posture. And are you happy with my dad? Because it's still weird as fuck, I'm not gonna lie. I actually laughed at that. Yes, it's weird as fuck. And yes, I'm happy. Happier than I ever was with you, frankly. Ouch. He winced, then smiled ruefully. Fair enough. He's a good man, better than me in most ways. In every way that matters, I agreed, not unkindly. As Ryan walked away to rejoin his bride, Robert approached, sliding an arm around my waist. Everything okay? Surprisingly, yes. I leaned into him. Your son just apologized. Apparently at your suggestion. I may have offered some fatherly advice. His eyes crinkled with that smile I'd fallen for. Did it help? I considered the question. It did, actually. Though not because I needed his apology. I realized I've already moved on, been free for a while now. Later that night, as we slow danced on the edge of the reception, Robert held me close, his lips near my ear. You know, watching you today, your grace, your strength, I realized something. What's that? I don't want to be your boyfriend or your partner or your complicated almost brother-in-law anymore. My heart stuttered. No? He pulled back to meet my eyes. No. I want to be your husband. The world seemed to stop. Robert, not right away. Not if you're not ready. But someday. His hand cupped my cheek. When I married Linda, I thought that was it. One love, one lifetime. I never imagined having a second chance like this, especially not with someone who came into my life the way you did. Tears pricked at my eyes. Are you proposing at your son's wedding? Talk about stealing their thunder. He laughed softly. Not proposing. Not yet. Just putting it out there, letting you know where I stand. I looked around at the celebration in full swing, at my sister in her white dress dancing with her new husband, at my parents tipsy and happy at their table, at this strange, imperfect family we'd somehow stitched together from the tatters of betrayal. Yes, I said, surprising myself. Not right now, but someday. Yes. Robert's smile could have lit up the night sky. Really? Really? I pulled him closer. But when we do get married, let's elope. I think this family has had enough wedding drama to last a lifetime. Deal. As we swayed to the music, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. How I'd set out to destroy Ryan through an elaborate revenge scheme, only to find something infinitely more valuable in the process. How the very worst moment of my life had somehow led to the very best. He cheated with my sister. 10 years later, I married his dad, except it wouldn't be 10 years. Maybe not even one. And the motivation was no longer revenge, but love. Pure and simple. Sometimes the universe has a plan so twisted, so perfectly imperfect, that you can't help but surrender to its bizarre brilliance. My revenge story had transformed into something else entirely. A love story. Messy, complicated, unlikely, but real. And really, isn't that the best revenge of all? 3 months after Ryan and Melissa's wedding, Robert and I were having dinner on our back patio when he slid a small velvet box across the table. I thought we agreed to wait, I said, eyeing the box like it might explode. We agreed on someday. He shrugged, that half-smile playing at his lips. Today seemed as good a someday as any. The ring inside was nothing like I'd imagined during those naive years with Ryan. No princess-cut diamond or traditional solitaire. Instead, it was an antique emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, set in platinum that caught the evening light. It was my grandmother's, Robert explained, not Linda's. I wanted something that was just ours. I slid it onto my finger, where it fit perfectly. It's beautiful. Is that a yes? I leaned across the table and kissed him. That's a hell yes. We eloped to Bali 2 months later, just as I'd suggested. No family drama, No awkward toasts, no seating arrangements designed to minimize potential conflicts. Just us, a sunset, and vows that acknowledged the bizarre path that had brought us together while promising a future built on something stronger than revenge. "I never expected you," Robert said during his vows, his voice catching. "You were the detour I didn't plan for, the complication I never anticipated, and the greatest surprise of my life." "I came looking for vengeance," I admitted in mine, "but found healing instead. Found you instead." When we returned home as husband and wife, we faced the inevitable family reactions. My parents were scandalized, not by the elopement, but by the age difference they'd never fully accepted. Ryan and Melissa sent a surprisingly thoughtful gift, a crystal frame with a note that read, "To new beginnings," in my sister's handwriting. Robert's friends mostly ribbed him about robbing the cradle, while mine had long since gotten used to my hot silver fox, as Kate still insisted on calling him. The gossip died down eventually. Life settled into new rhythms. We traveled, Robert taking me to places he'd always wanted to revisit, me dragging him to destinations he'd never considered. We renovated his house, blending his classic taste with my more contemporary aesthetic. We argued about politics, made love during thunderstorms, and built the kind of partnership I'd never quite believed existed. Not that it was all easy. The age gap showed itself in small ways, references he made that flew over my head, my music that made him wince, the occasional comment from strangers who assumed he was my father. There were harder moments, too, his first heart scare that sent me into a panic, conversations about children that we circled but never quite resolved, my career ambitions sometimes clashing with his readiness to slow down. But we figured it out. Day by day, compromise by compromise. Family gatherings were still an exercise in polite tension, especially at first. That first Christmas with all of us, Robert and me, Ryan and Melissa, my parents, a few confused cousins, was like a masterclass in awkward conversation. But even that got easier with time. Melissa got pregnant the following year, making Robert a grandfather and me, well, a step-grandmother at 34. Try putting that on your Facebook status. "Grandma," Ryan teased when I held his daughter for the first time. "Call me that again and I'll drop your child," I threatened sweetly, making Robert choke on his drink. Somehow we became a family. Not normal, never that, but functional in our own weird way. 5 years into our marriage, on the anniversary of that fateful hospital night when everything had blown up, Robert and I were having wine on our deck when he asked, "Do you ever regret it? How we started?" I considered the question carefully. I regret my motivations. I regret not being honest sooner. But the outcome? I reached for his hand, fingers tracing the wedding band he wore with such pride. "Never that. It's strange," he mused. "If Ryan hadn't cheated on you with Melissa, if you hadn't had that minor car accident and ended up in my ER, if you hadn't recognized my name." I laughed. 1,000 coincidences and bad decisions, all leading to the best decision I ever made. That night, lying in Robert's arms, I thought about the young woman I'd been. So consumed by betrayal, so desperate to inflict equal pain, so convinced that revenge would heal the wounds that Ryan and Melissa had left. I barely recognized her now, that vengeful, scheming nurse who'd seen Robert Daniels as nothing more than a means to an end. Life has a funny way of transforming our worst instincts into our greatest gifts, if we let it. Last month, Ryan and Melissa celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary. Robert and I sent them on a weekend getaway while we watched little Sophie, now 4 and precocious as hell. As I sat on the floor of our living room, helping her build a pillow fort while Robert read her favorite story for the 100th time, I was struck by the absurdity and the perfection of it all. Here I was, building blanket castles with my ex-boyfriend's daughter, who was also my niece, while my husband, who happened to be my ex's father, did voices for all the characters in The Gruffalo. "More growly, Grandpa," Sophie demanded, and Robert obliged with a roar that sent her into fits of giggles. "Grandpa, my husband, the love of my life. If you'd told me 6 years ago that this would be my future, that the man I'd targeted for revenge would become the center of my world, that the sister who betrayed me would become someone I could share holidays with, that I'd find peace in this bizarre family configuration, I would have laughed in your face. Yet here we are. He cheated with my sister, and I married his dad. But the story isn't about revenge anymore. It never really was. It's about how the heart finds what it needs, sometimes in the most unexpected places. It's about how healing can look nothing like you imagined. It's about how the universe has a twisted sense of humor and an even more twisted sense of justice. Most of all, it's about how sometimes when you set out to destroy someone else, you end up saving yourself instead. And really, that's the sweetest revenge of all. 10 years after that hospital confrontation, 10 years since I discovered my ex's father in a hospital bed and saw an opportunity for the perfect revenge. 10 years exactly. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asks, finding me on our balcony overlooking the ocean. We moved to the coast 3 years ago, close enough to visit family when we want, far enough to have our own space. "That it's been a decade," I say, accepting the coffee he hands me. 10 years since... Everything. Robert settles beside me, his movements slightly slower these days. At 68, he's still handsome as hell, still makes my heart skip when he walks into a room, but time marches on for all of us. The silver in his hair has surrendered to white. The lines around his eyes have deepened. But those eyes, those kind, intelligent eyes that saw through my revenge scheme to the wounded woman beneath, they haven't changed a bit. "A good 10 years, he says, reaching for my hand. I nod, watching the waves crash against the shore. The best. We've built a life I never could have imagined that night I stood in my hospital administrator outfit, making small talk with Ryan's father at a fundraiser. 7 years of marriage, a home we both love. Careers we've both transitioned, Robert finally retiring from his investment firm, me pivoting to hospital management consulting that lets me work remotely. Nieces and nephews we spoil shamelessly. A black lab named Einstein who's currently snoring at our feet. Not the life I planned. So much better than the life I planned. Sophie asked me something interesting yesterday, I say. Sophie, Ryan, and Melissa's oldest, is now 9 going on 30, whip-smart and cursed with my sister's stubbornness and Ryan's charm. What's that? She wanted to know how we met. I turned to him, smiling. What our love story was. Robert chuckles. What did you tell her? That it's complicated. That I'd explain when she's older. Much older. We both laugh at that. Our origin story isn't exactly the stuff of children's fairy tales, though sometimes it feels like one. A dark, twisted fairy tale where the princess starts out plotting revenge and ends up finding her true prince in the most unlikely place. We should write it down someday, Robert suggests. The real story. So there's a record of it. Who would believe it? I shake my head. He cheated with my sister. 10 years later, I married his dad. Sounds like a bad reality show. Or a good one, depending on your perspective. We sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the horizon. That's another gift of these 10 years. Learning to be quiet together, to exist in the same space without needing to fill it with words. My phone buzzes with a text from Melissa. Don't forget dinner tomorrow. Mom's making her lasagna. Ryan's grilling. Sophie has a science project to show you. Family dinner. Still surreal even after all this time. Not always easy, but no longer the minefield it once was. We've settled into our strange configuration with as much grace as possible. Ryan and I can now have actual conversations that don't vibrate with tension. Melissa and I have rebuilt something that's not quite sisterhood as we once knew it, but is solid in its own way. I text back, "We'll be there. Robert's bringing that wine you liked." Melissa confirms for tomorrow. I tell Robert, "Your son is apparently in charge of the grill, so maybe we should eat before we go." He smiles at my teasing. He's gotten better. The bar was on the floor, so that's not saying much. This is us now. Making gentle jokes about Ryan's cooking skills instead of nursing open wounds about his betrayal. Finding common ground as family instead of battlegrounds as enemies. I think about that young woman I was 10 years ago, so consumed by revenge that she couldn't see straight. So hurt that inflicting equal pain seemed like the only path to healing. So convinced that making Ryan suffer would somehow fix what he'd broken inside me. She seems like a stranger now. A hurt, angry stranger I wish I could hug and tell, it gets better. Not the way you're planning, not through revenge, but it gets so much better. You know what I realized recently? I say, turning to Robert. What's that, love? That if my revenge plan had actually worked, if I'd just dated you to hurt Ryan, then walked away triumphant, I would have missed everything. This, us. I gesture between us, to our home, to the life we've built. I would have missed the best part of my life. Robert's eyes are soft as he reaches for me, pulling me against his chest. I rest my head there, listening to his heartbeat, still strong, if occasionally irregular these days. Each beat a reminder of how precious this is, how fleeting, how unexpected. What's the saying? If you set out for revenge, dig two graves? He murmurs against my hair. Your revenge plot was supposed to destroy Ryan, but it might have destroyed you too. Instead, it saved me, I whisper. You saved me. We saved each other, and that's the truth of it. Robert pulled me from the darkness of betrayal, showed me what real partnership looked like, and I gave him a second chance at love when he thought that chapter of his life was closed forever. The irony isn't lost on me. The very man whose DNA helped create the person who broke my heart became the one to help me put it back together again. Better, stronger. 10 years ago, I thought revenge was the answer. I thought making Ryan hurt like I hurt would balance some cosmic scale. I thought seeing his face when he realized I was sleeping with his father would heal the wound of finding him with my sister. I was wrong. So spectacularly, beautifully wrong. The answer wasn't revenge. It wasn't making Ryan suffer. It wasn't even the forgiveness I eventually found, though that helped, like lancing an infected wound. The answer was building something new from the ashes of what was destroyed, finding joy despite the pain, because of the pain. Creating a life so rich and full that the betrayal became just one chapter in a much longer, more beautiful story. He cheated with my sister. 10 years later, I married his dad, and 10 years after that, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with. Living a life I never could have planned but wouldn't trade for anything. That's not revenge. That's redemption. That's grace. That's the real happily ever after. 15 years wasn't supposed to be a milestone. We'd already celebrated our 10th anniversary with a trip to Greece, already renewed our vows with a small ceremony on our beach for our 12th, but something about 15 years made me reflective in a way I hadn't expected. 15 years since the hospital. 15 years since revenge turned to something else entirely. I found myself thinking about it on a random Tuesday as I sorted through old photos, a project I'd been putting off for months. Robert had been gently nudging me to organize the family albums. For posterity, he'd say with that slight smirk, knowing full well I'd roll my eyes at his old-school insistence on physical photos in an age of digital memories. You won't believe what I found, I called out, hearing his footsteps approaching from his study. At 73, Robert moved more carefully these days. The heart surgery 3 years ago had been a wake-up call for both of us, a stark reminder of our age gap and the reality that came with it. But he'd recovered well, followed his doctor's orders with military precision, and now took daily walks along the beach with Einstein II. Our original lab had passed peacefully in his sleep 4 years prior. What's that? Robert peered over my shoulder, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. I held up a faded hospital ID badge, my old Memorial Hospital badge. From when we met. He took it from me, studying the image of a younger me with darker hair and a forced professional smile. You looked so serious. I was serious. About everything back then. Especially revenge, he added with a knowing look. Especially that. He lowered himself carefully beside me on the couch, picking up another photo, this one from Ryan and Melissa's wedding. Look at us. You in that navy dress that drove me crazy all night. Me trying not to stare at you like some lovesick teenager. You failed miserably at that, if I recall. I did, he agreed cheerfully. Best failure of my life. We sat together, sifting through the physical evidence of our improbable journey, photos from our elopement, Christmas gatherings that grew less awkward with each passing year. Sophie's school plays and baseball games, Ryan and Melissa's second daughter, Zoe, now 7, and the spitting image of my mother, beach vacations and family reunions, the hodgepodge collection of moments that somehow added up to a life. Do you ever wonder, I asked, what would have happened if I hadn't recognized your name that day in the hospital? If I'd just treated you like any other patient and moved on? Robert considered this, the way he considered everything, thoughtfully, taking his time. I'd like to think we would have found each other anyway, maybe at another hospital fundraiser, maybe somewhere else entirely. You believe in fate that much? I believe in us that much. He squeezed my hand. Some connections are too important to leave to chance. Maybe he was right. Maybe in some parallel universe we met under normal circumstances, a chance encounter at a bookstore or a dinner party, or just bumping carts at the grocery store. Maybe in that universe we fell in love without the complication of revenge or betrayal or family drama, but this was our universe. Our messy, complicated, beautiful reality. The doorbell rang, interrupting my philosophical musings. "That'll be Sophie," Robert said, making no move to get up. "She said she'd stop by after school." At 15, Sophie was spending her spring break with us while Ryan and Melissa took Zoe to Disney World, an arrangement that worked for everyone. Sophie claimed to be too old for princesses and preferred the quiet of our beach house to the chaos of theme parks. In reality, I suspected she just enjoyed being the center of attention with her grandfather, who doted on her shamelessly. I let her in, accepting her teenage half-hug, too cool for full embraces these days, as she breezed past me toward the kitchen. "Is there food?" "I'm starving." She dropped her backpack on a chair with the casual disregard of adolescence. "Oh, hey, what's all this?" She'd spotted our photo project spread across the coffee table. "Just sorting through old pictures," I explained. "Your grandfather insists we need physical albums like it's 1995. Vintage is cool, actually," Sophie informed me with the authority of youth. "Everyone's into analog stuff now. Film cameras, vinyl records, physical photos." Robert shot me a triumphant look. "See? I'm not old-fashioned, I'm cutting edge." Sophie picked up a wedding photo, not ours but Ryan and Melissa's. "Mom looks so young here. And Dad's hair," she giggled. "What a disaster." "Your father never did figure out what to do with those curls," Robert agreed. "Got that from his mother's side." Sophie studied the photo more closely. "Wait, Aunt Emma, you were at their wedding? I thought—" She trailed off, looking suddenly uncomfortable. The family history, the real story, was something we'd never explicitly discussed with the kids. They knew the basic timeline. I had dated Ryan, it ended badly. Later I met Robert. The messier details had been omitted, deemed too complicated for young ears. But Sophie wasn't young anymore. At 15, she was perceptive, thoughtful, already showing signs of the woman she would become. "Yes, I was at their wedding," I confirmed. "It was complicated." She gave me that look teenagers perfect around 13, the one that says, "I'm not a child, stop treating me like one." "Because you dated Dad before Mom did," she stated plainly. "Everyone knows that part." Robert and I exchanged glances. "Everyone knows that part, but not the whole story." "There's more to it than that," Robert said carefully. "Sometimes adult relationships are complex." Sophie rolled her eyes with spectacular teenage drama. "I'm not 5. You can say Dad cheated on Aunt Emma with Mom. I've known that for like 3 years. I nearly choked. "You've known what?" "Zoe and I found old texts on Mom's phone. She was upset about something and left it unlocked. We were just playing games, but then these old messages popped up." Sophie shrugged like this was no big revelation. She was telling someone, Aunt Kate, I think, about how guilty she still feels sometimes. About you and Dad and everything that happened. The room fell silent as Robert and I processed this information. My sister still carried guilt. After all these years, all the family holidays, all the pretend normalcy, she still felt the weight of her betrayal. I wasn't sure how that made me feel. "So if Dad cheated on you with Mom," Sophie continued with the brutal directness of youth, "how did you end up with Grandpa?" "That's the weird part no one ever explains." Robert coughed, clearly hiding amusement. "That's a fair question." I looked at this girl. My niece? My stepdaughter? Hard to classify, but family by any definition. She deserved some version of the truth. "I met your grandfather by coincidence after everything happened with your dad," I said carefully. "He came into the hospital where I worked as a nurse." "But weren't you like super mad at Dad? Wasn't it weird to date his father?" I exchanged another look with Robert, who nodded slightly. "My call. At first," I admitted, "I thought it might be a way to get back at your dad, to hurt him like he hurt me." Sophie's eyes widened. "Holy shit, that's cold." Then catching Robert's expression, "Sorry." "Holy crap." "Language," he murmured automatically. "It was cold," I agreed. "I was in a dark place. Hurt people sometimes think hurting others will make them feel better." "But it doesn't," Sophie said, unexpectedly wise. "No, it doesn't. What I didn't expect was to actually fall in love with your grandfather, to find something real and lasting where I was only looking for revenge." Sophie considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "So it started as like a revenge plot, but turned into true love? That's actually kind of romantic. In a super messed up way." Robert laughed outright at that. "An accurate assessment. Does Dad know that you were originally using Grandpa to get back at him?" I nodded. "We had a big confrontation at the hospital years ago." Everything came out, the history, my initial motivations, all of it. It wasn't pretty, but they worked through it, Robert added. Your father and Emma. It took time, but they found a way forward. That's why family dinners were so weird when we were little, Sophie mused. I always thought it was just because you guys were old and boring. Thanks for that, I said dryly. She grinned, then grew serious again. So, if you hadn't wanted revenge on Dad, you and Grandpa might never have gotten together. And you might not be my, whatever you are, step-grandmother, aunt-in-law? The nomenclature is challenging, Robert offered. Just Emma, I said softly. Just family. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this answer. Then, in typical teenage fashion, her attention shifted completely. So, is there food or what? I'm still starving. As Robert led her to the kitchen, pulling out ingredients for sandwiches, I remained with the photos, struck by the strange paths that lead us to where we're meant to be. Had my desire for revenge been wrong? Absolutely. Petty and small and potentially destructive. But it had also led me here, to this life, to this family that defied conventional labels but worked anyway. Maybe this was the lesson in it all. That our worst impulses, our darkest moments don't have to define us. That sometimes the wrong turn leads to the right destination. That love can grow in the most inhospitable soil if given enough time and care. Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed in our guest room, Robert and I stood on our deck, watching the moon cast silver light across the water. So our origin story is out, he said, his arm warm around my waist. At least to the next generation. She took it better than I expected. Kids are resilient. And Sophie's smart. She knows that relationships are complicated, that good people can make bad choices, that love isn't always straightforward. I leaned into him, grateful for his warmth against the cool night air. She called it romantic. Our revenge-turned-love story. Smart girl. He pressed a kiss to my temple, though I prefer the love part to the revenge part. Me too. 15 years. From vengeance to this. From plotting to destroy Ryan's relationship with his father, to building my own relationship that had nothing to do with Ryan at all. From seeing Robert as a means to an end, to recognizing him as my beginning, my middle, my ever after. He cheated with my sister. And yes, I married his dad. But the real story wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about how sometimes we find our way to the right place for all the wrong reasons. How healing comes in forms we never expect. How love, real love, transforms us in ways revenge never could. And that, not the marriage, not the beach house, not the family we'd cobbled together from broken pieces, was the true happy ending. The journey from darkness to light, from revenge to redemption, from bitter endings to beautiful beginnings. Some might call it karma, others might call it fate. I just call it life. My wonderfully unexpected life.